As many as 26% of New Zealanders will experience infertility during their lifetime. This can be a lonely, isolating, confusing, challenging, and traumatic time for many. Kia ora koutou, I'm Kate Barbie. I'm the support coordinator for Fertility New Zealand. Thanks for joining us tonight and welcome to Fertility New Zealand's webinar series. Fertility New Zealand walks alongside all people facing fertility challenges. We do this by providing support and information services and being the voice to our community through advocacy work. I encourage you to jump onto our website, check out our services, and connect with us on social media. Tonight, I am thrilled to introduce Helen Nicholson, our wonderful guest presenter. Helen is a fertility counsellor at Repromed New Zealand and provides counselling services for people using fertility services to create their whānau. In this webinar, Helen will walk us through the ECART application process and what to expect. At the end, Helen will answer your questions, so pop them into the chat box and we'll address those during the Q&A session. We hope you enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Helen.
Oh, kia ora, Kate. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Hi everyone. I'm Helen Nicholson, and I'm here today to talk about the Ethics Committee on Assisted Reproductive Technology, commonly known as ECART. And my aim today is to provide some information on when you might need an ECART application, what's involved, a bit about how you might prepare, and a bit about ECART themselves. And I do hope that we'll have some time for questions at the end, so that will be helpful for you if there's something in particular you want to ask that I haven't covered. So ECART was established following the introduction of the Human Assisted Reproductive Technology legislation, which was enacted in 2004. And the committee was set up and it follows guiding principles that the Heart Act established. And committee members are people who have legal, scientific, medical, cultural, ethical, and lived experience of fertility matters and expertise. And so the members aim to make decisions by consensus or through a voting system, and their decisions must be consistent with the guidelines. And the guidelines have been put in place by the Advisory Committee on Assisted Reproductive Technology, known as ECART. So ECART follows the guidelines provided by ECART. ECART provide the guidelines which are consistent with the Act, and that's how the hierarchy works. ECART members can be on the committee for a maximum of 2 3-year terms. I think look at the website if you want to know about who the current members are, what their skill sets are, and the upcoming meeting dates, and also minutes of meetings are up on the website as well. It's got lots of good information, and I think that just in consideration of the time that we have tonight, if you want to look more into the committee and its terms of reference, that's a good place to look, and you can find them on an easy Google search. If it doesn't come up under ECART, put the Ethics Committee of Assisted Reproductive Technology in there. Sometimes it doesn't come up straight away if you're Googling ECART. So, when is an application needed? An ethics application is required for what are considered complex third-party reproductive arrangements. And these are arrangements like for surrogacy, embryo donation, donor eggs in combination with donor sperm, and this is often referred to as double donation. And also ECART applications are required for some family arrangements. So that might be, for example, an intergenerational donation arrangement, or if a family member has offered to be a donor and that family member is not a direct sibling, cousin, or partner to the intended parents. The explanation of when within family gamete donations are required is also up on the ECART website. But if you're in a situation and you're not sure if you would need to do an application, you'd just be best to talk to your fertility provider and they would be able to guide you in that. So ECART is also the body who can approve extension of storage applications. So that's when people need to extend their storage of gametes or embryos. The law in New Zealand allows for eggs and sperm and embryos to be stored for up to 10 years. And if people haven't completed in that time, they can make an application to ECART for an extension of storage. And sometimes this might be important to bear in mind if your plan to build your family is using donor eggs or sperm, which has already been frozen and stored, because the storage period starts from the time that the eggs or sperm were collected. I don't want to confuse things too much. Again, it would be one of those things that you could discuss with the clinic, and the clinic could guide you on what would be required for an extension of storage. So what's involved and how much does an ECART application cost? The cost of ECART applications varies across the 3 clinic providers. And I'm talking about the 3 clinic providers who are based in Auckland. I know that in the rest of New Zealand, the provider there is Fertility Associates, and they're based in the south as well as the North Island. The 3 providers in Auckland are Fertility Plus, Repromed, and Fertility Associates, although all the 3 clinics see patients from outside of Auckland and in different parts of the country if they're travelling up for treatment. So the cost of an application varies slightly across the 3 clinics, and in general, an application charge sits between about $2,700 and $3,700, depending on the clinic. And there's no public funding available for ECART applications. So even if your treatment is publicly funded, if you need to put in an application for surrogacy or embryo donation, the application process isn't covered by public funding at this time. Sometimes people ask if they can submit an ECART application without a clinic being involved. And for treatment-related arrangements, so those arrangements like embryo donation, surrogacy, donation between certain family members, the answer is no. And that's because it's the clinic that submits the application in order to get the approval to do the treatment. However, if you're a person who's got eggs or sperm, for example, frozen already, and you want to extend the storage of those or the storage of embryos which have been frozen for 10 years, you can do that application to ECART yourself. You just might need to contact the clinic where the gametes and embryos are stored just to help you complete the request. But it's a pretty straightforward process, and you can do it through the website, through the ECART website. But in general, the type of applications that I'm talking about tonight, where people are planning arrangements around surrogacy or embryo donation, that kind of thing, those applications are done by clinics. And those applications require medical and counselling reports for all of the people involved. So an ECART cost generally covers all the counselling, the writing and preparation of the summary reports that have to go into the application, and the coordination of the application. The clinic, each clinic has an ECART coordinator, and they are people generally setting up appointments, collating all the information that might need to come from outside sources. They ensure that the application is a clean document with no identifying information in it, and they also might be communicating with ECART about particular matters. So all of that facilitation is absorbed into the ECART charge that the clinic is charging. It is important to note that the charge that the clinics charge for an ECART application doesn't cover legal appointments. So if you're involved in a surrogacy arrangement, then legal advice and reports for both intended parents and surrogates are required for those applications, and the cost of the legal appointments will be additional to the ECART charge. Clinic staff, either counsellors or coordinators, depending on the clinic, can provide you with a list of lawyers who are familiar with ECART requirements and the particular issues that they need to cover off when they're giving advice on a surrogacy arrangement. And so generally what happens is that the counsellors or the coordinator will give intended parents a list and say these lawyers are familiar with what's required, and go away and contact and make an appointment. Now there can be other costs incurred for additional specialists' reports that might be required for an application. So, for example, if your fertility doctor recommends that an obstetric physician's review is essential either for yourself as an intended parent or for a surrogate if there's a complicated obstetric history perhaps. So those appointments might be at an additional cost to you. And sometimes some clinics will charge their medical specialist consults separately if you're not eligible for publicly funded treatment. So if you're a new client at a clinic, you'll probably be paying a medical specialist consult charge, and then when you move into your ECART application, the ECART cost will be on top of that. If it's surrogacy, there might be lawyers' costs, and then if other specialty reports are required, there might be some costs around that, but not all the time. So in terms of counselling, what I can speak to is that the number of counsellings required in an ECART application vary, and that's going to be dependent on the situation and whether people significant to the applicants want or need to be involved. Speaking very generally, there are 2 individual counselling sessions per party, so whether that's per person if you're a single person, or if you're in a relationship, per couple. So there might be 2 for example, in a surrogacy application, the intended parents will have 2 counselling sessions. The surrogate and her partner, if she has one, will have 2 counselling sessions, and then there is a joint session altogether. So generally speaking, there are about 5 counselling appointments in total for everyone. But if you have an application, for example, if you're using donated eggs and donated sperm in combination, and if one of those donors is not known to you, if they're a clinic donor, then there is not a requirement for a joint session. So the clinic will guide you onto what's required, and they'll also allow for more counselling sessions in case there's some complexity or something contentious comes up during counselling. Clinics also need to allow for the inclusion of family members and any existing children if that's what people want. So that may increase the number of counselling sessions that are done for an application, and as well as the counselling in an application such as a surrogacy application, a letter is needed from Oranga Tamariki, and that letter is Oranga Tamariki social worker would be recommending the granting of an adoption order to an intending parent or parents for a child born through surrogacy. And so that process happens separately to the counselling process that is happening through the clinic. In order for Oranga Tamariki to be able to provide the letter in a timely way for an ECART application, what the clinics do is encourage people at the first counselling session to contact Oranga Tamariki and request the adoption pack, and that means that intended parents can start filling out the forms and sending them in so that a social worker can be allocated, and then an adoption social worker will set up a meeting and work forward from there. So what the clinics try and do is work in tandem with the Oranga Tamariki social workers for surrogacy applications so that things are moving along at the same pace, just as best we can. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was I just wanted to talk a little bit about police vetting, because in embryo donation arrangements, there is a police vetting requirement for intended parents, and the clinics will be requesting a police vetting prior to people being considered for embryo donation. And that's if they're in the clinic's recipient pool or in the case of known arrangements. So police vetting will be asked for prior to an application getting underway. Now, I know that many people have concerns about police vetting if they have any kind of police record. And I guess what I would just encourage you to do is talk to the counsellor at the clinic about your concerns and go from there. Don't let some historical charge put you off from having the conversation. In the ECART application, it's actually the medical specialist for the intended parents who is required to confirm that police vetting has happened. So it's a requirement on the form as well. So it has to happen before the application can be submitted. And I do want to say again that all these applications are de-identified. So people are not identified by any names. Everyone's referred to either as an intended parent or a surrogate or a gamete donor. And this is essential for privacy because the minutes of ECART meeting discussions and decisions are actually available to read on the website. So that's why they're de-identified, so that you would have your privacy, as they're public minutes and they're available for anyone to go and look into. And if anyone has any questions about any of this, of course, I'm happy to answer those at the end. So timelines. how long might it take to get an ECART application done? It can take several months for the ECART process to be completed, and for an application to be submitted, and for a decision to be made. And it might be because of spacing between counselling appointments, for people to have time to reflect and discuss things together. It can be as we're trying to coordinate medical information and a number of other things. So in all, the process can take several months. ECART meets about 6 times a year. And what happens is the deadline for applications is always a month before the meeting date. So, for example, this year, the next meeting date is the 11th of April, and already the agenda has closed. The agenda closed in March, and so in that meeting in April, it takes about up to 3 or 4 weeks before the clinic receives a decision letter. So that process of getting the application into the meeting for the committee to consider it and then get the decision out is like a 2-month process. And the decisions run on, I think the best way of describing it is like a traffic light system. So you can get a green light or an approval decision, and sometimes an approval with conditions on it. You can get an amber light, which is a deferral. And then there is a red light, which is a decline. So if your application is approved with conditions, that's often a really straightforward, very straightforward kind of thing. So, for example, a condition might be something like a surrogate has to have obstetric care through a pregnancy. So the ECART decision will say, yes, we approve the application on the condition that the surrogate receives obstetric care through her pregnancy. And so that just means that the clinic and the applicants just need to ensure that that those conditions are followed. Another condition might be that an update is required from the counsellor, for example, and about a specific issue prior to treatment starting. So that might mean that further discussions are needed just before treatment commences. That could be something, for example, about how a child's cultural needs might be met. So an ECART approval is you get the tick for, yep, it's to go ahead, but just ensure that these conditions are followed. A deferral requires the clinic to gather more information for ECART to review to help them in the decision-making process. So that could be more medical information. Something like an additional medical specialist's report might be asked for, or a psychologist's report. It could be a directive to the counsellors to go back and address something more specific in counselling. And so what we do in those instances where we get a deferral is we look at what's being asked for. We look at what we need to do to ensure that we can get that information back to ECART. We might be setting up appointments or asking you and directing you to go and set up an appointment, for example, with an obstetric physician. And then we submit some more reports, whether that's a letter from a medical specialist or more counselling reports, and we submit those at the next meeting once all the information has been gathered. So when you get a deferral, it means that some more work needs to be doing. all the information is put together and resubmitted. It needs to be resubmitted at a meeting. ECART won't look at that new information outside of a meeting arena. They want to sit together again, look at the original application, look at the additional information, and then make their decision from there. So that can add a bit of time on to the process. And then a decline, so a decision for a decline, when the committee declines, a decline can be reviewed and it might be changed. So, but that is very definitely a case-by-case situation, and it's too difficult to comment on here what might make the difference to change ECART's decision of a decline to an approval. That would need to be a discussion with the clinic. There are some things that we wouldn't be able to provide any more additional information that would change the decision, but it could be maybe that there might be something else that the clinic is willing to support you to do to see if they would reconsider. There's not a formal appeal process, but you can go back to the committee and ask for reconsideration on a decline. It may make the difference, or it may not, in terms of their next decision. So when you get an approval, the approvals are valid for 3 years, and then they can be extended. For some people won't have completed their families in 3 years, and they might need to go back to the committee and ask for the approval to be extended. The requests for extension can be done through the clinics, and they might involve just some updated letters, either from a medical specialist, for example, or the counsellors. And what I'm thinking of is something like an arrangement where donor eggs and donor sperm have been used, and maybe you as a parent, you've had a child, but you still have embryos in storage, and you want to try for a further pregnancy to grow your family, but the approval is coming up to the expiry date. So we would contact you and talk with you about asking for an extension of approval from ECART. The other thing about approvals is that they can be transferred between clinics. That just requires the medical directors at both the fertility clinics involved to confirm to ECART in writing that they want the transfer to happen. And this is generally a fast process, and this is one of the things that can be done between meetings. And I'm kind of heading towards my last slide about what it is that you might do to prepare for an application. And I suppose when I was, what I was thinking about this was that for all arrangements, whether you're an intended parent, a potential surrogate, or a donor, I think it's important to take time out to think about your values and what's important to you if you're going to be if you're going to be planning or moving, wanting to move forward in one of these types of arrangements. So if you're an intended parent and you need to include donor eggs or donor sperm or donor embryos or a surrogate to build your family, you might have lots of questions and lots of feelings, and they can be quite intense. So sometimes it can be helpful to write down all that's coming into your mind, all the questions and the reflections that you might be making when you're talking to others about it, and then start a list that you can keep revisiting as you're thinking through about what the possible arrangement is going to look like. And equally, if you're a surrogate or a donor, write down all the questions that you might have take time to tell someone about why you want to help somebody else have a family. And then that gives you an opportunity to kind of explore your motivation and your rationale behind the decision in that conversation. And I think that these kind of thinking, talking processes can help you prepare for counselling. And when you come into counselling for an ECART arrangement, then in those counselling sessions, we are kind of traversing a whole landscape of different things. And I, just off the top of my head, I kind of put a list together. In counselling, we're talking about medical and mental health history, current personal transitions and life stresses. We're talking about coping strategies and support systems. We're asking you to think about how you might share information throughout a planned arrangement, how your communication works, all of these things, that needs and preferences, how you might set boundaries in a relationship. All these things are things that can be important for you to think about, and maybe even and begin to talk about with your with the other people involved in the application. So whether that's you as an intended parent, talking to your surrogate about these kind of things, asking them, speaking with one another really about how you might communicate, what works best, what your plans are for contact in the future, as well as all the getting to know each other kind of stuff. If you don't know each other well, spend some time to do all that, and that will help prepare you for the counselling. And these are the kind of things that we talk about in counselling. And we cover some, quite a lot of a personal exploration around values and beliefs, particularly in regards to things like decisions around pregnancies, termination of pregnancy, how you might support one another, or how you might look after yourselves if things are not going as well as you would hope. How you might manage a communication through pregnancy loss, that kind of thing. So these are the discussions and counsellings. We have them individually with you, and then we have them all together before we submit an application. So that's me. I've been talking for just over half an hour, and I was thinking now, Kate, maybe can we have a look at some questions, if there are any questions? I'm not quite sure where Kate's gone, so I'm just going to wait. Oh, here we go. Hi, Kate.
Hi there. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So just, I've got a question for you anyway. Going through embryo donation, do you need to meet with a lawyer, or is it just for surrogacy?
It's just for surrogacy. So long time ago, legal reports were required, but that changed 15 years ago or something. I think all the clinics would recommend if you to seek some legal advice, but that's optional if people want to or not. Actually, the law is quite clear in embryo donation around who are the legal parents once a child is born. It's not as complicated as surrogacy, where an adoption process has to be followed. So no legal reports required for an ECART application for embryo donation.
Cool, thanks for that. See, we do have a couple of questions in here.
So I can see a question. Can you see the question from Sam Kate? It says, if you're approved by ECART with Fertility Associates, does that mean you are approved for all Fertility Associates clinics New Zealand wide? So yes, because it would be the clinic that holds the clinic provider which holds the approval. Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. Maybe, Kate, I'm always jumping in. I'll let you direct the questions to me, sorry.
For embryo donation, does the ECART put any weighing on how donors are found, e.g. if they're found on social media platforms such as Love Makes a Family versus via clinics? Great question.
Yeah, really great question. Well, speaking from experience, I think that what ECART are interested in is so what ECART are interested in is assessing for well-being of all the people involved. So if you meet someone on a forum, and lots of people connect through forums, then take the time, like spend at least 3 months getting to know one another, maybe before you start an application process. So spend some time talking, and so that you feel confident about the kind of relationship that you have with one another. So what ECART would be interested in is this is a purposeful relationship, and how is it working, and what's the communication and between one another, how is that kind of being presented through the counselling process? Does it appear that everyone's well-being, I'll use that quite general word, has been taken into consideration, and people are mindful of one another's boundaries, that communication is respectful, that kind of thing. So I'm quite long in the tooth, I've been around for quite a long time, and I remember back in the day it used to be that it was considered favourable if people knew each other in these complex third-party arrangements. But over time that's changed, and now we know that people are connecting through forums and different platforms for these arrangements, and it's more about how you work, how the relationship between you is working, that's most important. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Great. How involved does the husband of the surrogate have to be in the process?
That's a good question. Well, and I would say involved in terms of, so I've got my counselling hat on, I guess, when I'm answering this question, and I'm thinking that if you have a partner, or if the surrogate has a partner or a husband, we would want that person to be involved with the counselling. And I think I would really like to emphasise here, it's not about that person giving permission to the surrogate. It's about support, because obviously a surrogate who is pregnant is going to be pregnant within the relationship and the family. So it'd be important that the partner of the surrogate's involved in counselling, so they have an opportunity to think about all those kind of things that I had on that list of what might be discussed, and able to think about the implications for themselves as well as the wider family. And it's an opportunity for voice and thought. So yes, from the counselling perspective, we would want a surrogate's husband to be involved in the counselling all the way through. And it's important legally, because of course in a surrogacy, the surrogate is the birth mother, and the birth mother and her partner are the legal parents when a child is born until that formal adoption process has happened. So it's really important for a surrogate's partner to be aware, because there are legal implications in terms of parenting rights and responsibilities. Yeah.
And just quickly off that, would that affect the ECART their response as well, if the husband, or would it not even get that far?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I haven't ever encountered when someone hasn't wanted to be involved, because I think a surrogate's partner is always aware about the possible implications for themselves in that process. And I think that perhaps if the yeah, I don't know. I feel like I want to answer the question, but I'm not sure. And
Okay.
I suppose as a clinic counsel, we would always say, please be involved, and if you're not, we're not sure what might happen. And it's a big process to go through an ECART application. It costs quite a lot of money, and we might consider, for example, that it would be unfair on the other party, because if the application was turned down and the applicants have gone through the process to kind of with no probable approval. Yeah.
It is. It's very tough, having been on that end and having that been declined for myself. I do. It is very tough. So yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have examples of why ECART would decline an application?
So it might be. So just, I guess the thing that springs to the top of my head is it might be a surrogate's health. And I keep talking about surrogacy. I suppose that's the thing that comes to my mind straight away. So if it's considered that there would be a risk to a surrogate's health, that might be a reason for a decline. So, for example, if the surrogate had a particular medical history or obstetric history that might put her at what would be considered too much of a risk, then that might be why. It could be that it could be something psychosocial. It could be, for example, that maybe there is something between the two parties. There's not an agreement on something, and ECART might decline if agreement couldn't be found, because they would see it as not being in the best interests of a child or of the people involved. Yeah. So not just medical issues, could be psychosocial as well, or it could be maybe a legal aspect if there was an issue around the risk of a resultant child being perhaps not being able to be adopted, maybe through some complex international arrangement. Yeah, so there are probably a number of things. Yeah, I would like to say though that ECART, they approve most things. Like I think they approve 80% of applications, 85% of applications which come to them. So they generally approve, and they're just trying to ensure that that no one's that the health and well-being of children as a result of the proposed arrangement first that's prioritized, and then the health and well-being of others.
I have to admit, the fertility counsellors are very thorough in what they do and the work that they submit. So, I mean, that's a huge reflection on your work Helen as well, and the other fertility counsellors who provide, submit those applications in, and having such a huge success rate. So, yeah, thank you for the hard work that you guys do with these
Thank you.
applications.
Yeah, I mean, if we have, and I don't want to speak for all the other counsellors, but I think that at Repromed, my colleague Lani and I, if we think that something is maybe potentially going to be a hurdle, like quite a big hurdle, we will flag it so that everyone's aware. Yeah. And hurdles are not necessarily. So I'm a social worker by background, so I don't think hurdles. It's like hopefully no one from ECART is watching this with their hand on their head, but it's like when you get a decline, I kind of think, okay, can we solve the problem? Like, is there another way around it, or can we do something else? So hurdles don't necessarily mean lines. They're just how are we going to get around.
Yeah. So this is a surrogacy arrangement question. What factors are taken into consideration in determining whether child or children of surrogate should be involved in counselling? Great question.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, really great questions. So what factors are taken? Well, I'd say straight off the top of my head, age. So children are quite small, kind of under 7. We wouldn't necessarily be expecting them to also. So I'm going to say like 7 and under. We would be talking really with the parents of those children about what parents think is in the best interests of those children. So, for example, when you're small, talking about a proposed arrangement. Hopefully my internet hasn't dropped out. Can you hear me, Kate? Just give me a thumbs up.
Yeah. I can hear you. It has been, you are freezing here and there. So, have we lost Helen there now? We were doing a test before we went live, and we were hoping this wasn't going to happen. We have managed so well in the evening. So Helen's just going to rejoin us, and she'll be back on in a few seconds to answer this question. Just out of my own personal journey, my children were 5 and under when we went through embryo donation, and we didn't include them in the process. I know this is surrogacy and it's a little bit different, but yeah, and that was our choice as well. We didn't think that the children were really ready for that, ready to be involved at that age. So we'll just give Helen a few more seconds to join, and I hope we'll get her back really soon to ask the last of these questions. And thank you so much for being here tonight as well. We're sorry to have just a little bit of technical issues. And I will just check where Helen is. Helen's just joining us back now, so it won't be too much longer. All right, here she comes now. Hey.
Hi, sorry.
Not a problem.
So age of children, that's what I was saying, age of children.
Yes.
Because when they're small, seeing something through takes a really long time. And but perhaps if you've got a young child but older children, so if you've got like a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, the 7-year-old, we might say, come to counselling with your brothers or sisters, just because, those children can have questions because their older siblings are talking about it. And it's about kind of including all the family so everyone's voice is heard in that situation. Yeah,
fantastic. Thanks, Helen. So just see. What are examples of medical reasons that could cause a surrogate to be declined?
Well, I suppose I'm the least clinical person that you would be talking in an application, but so it really, I guess what I'm thinking is if there's a risk for that surrogate to be pregnant. So, for example, maybe something, some difficulty in a previous pregnancy. So it could be obstetric risk, or it could be like a medical reason. And I guess I'm a bit cautious about saying, but for example, if the surrogate had a heart issue, just for example, that might be declined because the committee would consider that it wasn't in that surrogate's best interest if there was going to be a significant risk to her health. Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Helen. All right, it does look like we're coming to the end of our questions for tonight.
Okay.
So just give everybody a few more seconds just to make sure it is the last one. But in the meantime, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you very much for you for being here tonight, Helen. I really appreciate your time, and your presentation was very clear and very thorough. So yeah, really appreciate you being here tonight. So thank you very much. And that is the last of our questions. We've got no more. So it's time for you to go and enjoy your evening now and sit back and relax. Yeah. So yeah. So good night and take care. Thank you very much for being here, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.